All right, Nistune Setup. First thing you're gonna need is a Nistune ECU, and there's a difference. There's also a feature pack Nistune that comes with I think it's a separate board, but I do not have the feature pack Nistune. So that's the first thing. Second thing, you do need to download the Nistune software. You just go straight to the Nistune website and go down to software downloads. I believe it shows two versions of Nistune, the latest one and one previous version, in case you run into any errors with the new release. I think they release it every couple months or so, a new version updates to make sure everything's working properly. So you do need the latest Nistune version, and then you also need the ROM file pack. This contains all the bin files, which are all the base maps to start from. The next important thing for Nistune would be under the support tab under general documentation. This has the Nistune software installation and users manual. It goes very in depth on how to install the software, which should be pretty self-explanatory. Also the basics of the Nistune program, so it's very important to read that top one as well as that second one, Nistune ECU Tuning Basics. This is the software users manual. I think it's 80 pages or something, but it goes all the way down into how to load everything, download, and then it goes into a lot of explanations of the terms and how the software works. So it was a little confusing the first time I read all the way through it. A little hard to pick up on the terms and terminology that's being used, but very important, a lot of information in here. All right, Nistune ECU Tuning Basics is another very important document to read all the way through. And you'll see that the number one point here is a solid base to tune from. So it gives a list of some very important things that we need to go over before we even start trying to use Nistune. Number one is no fault codes. The nice thing about Nistune is you don't need to read the flashing lights anymore. You can actually just see a dialog box and it will pop up all the fault codes. But if your car was running before, you need to make sure there was no fault codes before. You know, you can't just install a Nistune ECU and try and tune around that. Number two is the MAF. It says either need a new MAF or a clean MAF. New Z31 MAFs are kind of hard to come by, so make sure you gently clean your MAF with a specified cleaner for it. Number three is the fuel pump and filter. So I did replace the fuel pump with Marlboro 450, also did the relay mod, and we have a fuel pressure regulator to monitor the pressure and adjust the pressure. And we also have a brand new inline fuel filter. Those are all very important things. You know, if you're having weak fuel pressure or a clogged fuel filter, you could run into a lot of issues trying to figure out the tune. Number four is ignition timing. The timing readout in Nistune needs to match the mechanical timing with the timing light on the crank. That's the only thing you need to check there, is that it matches. So if Nistune says it's 15 degrees at idle, you need to make sure that the timing light on the crank also shows 15 degrees. Number five is TPS or throttle position sensor. This needs to be double checked, make sure it's adjusted properly. Also, because I did the block offs all in one, I did need to adjust the idle set screw and also readjust the TPS after I adjusted the idle set screw. Number six is spark plugs. Might as well just go ahead and throw in a fresh set of spark plugs that are gapped properly. And then number seven is fuel. You shouldn't use stale fuel. Everybody's got a project car that's been sitting for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Dump all that fuel out, put it in your old truck or whatever, and go get a fresh tank or a fresh couple gallons of high octane, at least 91, 93, and put it in the tank to start from. All right, we're in the car. We have our Nistune ECU over there, and we have opened up the Nistune software on the laptop. First thing, you see this startup wizard. We can just move this over real quick. You also see a couple little dialog boxes. Those might come in handy later. First thing we need to do is connect to the ECU though. Turn the key on, We have plugged in our console cable that comes from the Nistune ECU. It does show a couple things on this initial startup, but we're going to do something a little different. We're just going to go ahead and click consult to the ECU, and it should connect to your ECU and show your ECU part number. Now this is a something I'm unsure about. There's a little discrepancy on the ECU part number that's on the case and the one that shows up here in Nistune. I don't know if that has something to do with the firmware that's downloaded to the ECU board or the Nistune board, but this is what shows up. And then if you had a feature pack ECU, you would see FP on the end of this ECU part number. So now that we're connected to the ECU, the first thing I would say to do would be to download the bass tune off of your ECU, whatever may have been on there. I bought this one off of Facebook Marketplace, so I'm not really sure what tune or bass map was on there, but I didn't save the initial one. Probably would have been a good idea to have done that. But you do that just by hitting the down arrow right here. You click the down arrow right here, that will load the tune from the ECU to your Nistune software right here, and then it will put it up in this top dialog box right here. So then you can go to File, Save ECU Image As, and save this as your bass tune or first tune, whatever, that came off the ECU, and just save it in a, I have a little tunes folder right here. Just save it right here or wherever, just to have a good starting point or a good baseline to see where the ECU started. Okay, so now that first tune has been saved off the ECU, we're going to start from scratch and see if we can get the car running. So first thing, you can do this a couple different ways, but we'll go up here and click the open file, and this brings us to the, this is the ROM pack of all the bin files. You can see this PC documents Nistune ROM pack. We have a Type 1 board for the Z31, and this is a Z31 VG30. So these are all the bass tunes for the VG30. It has everything from the VG30E naturally aspirated all the way down to the VG30ET, which is the turbo. Now, since we did do the turbo swap, and you're probably trying to run Nistune because you have a turbo or something, we'll just go ahead and assume that everyone's running a turbo map. So it'd be good to start with a base turbo map as opposed to a naturally aspirated map. The other thing I believe to be true is that the first 3 digits of the last 5 digits of your ECU part number have to match. So this is my ECU part number up here. The last 5 digits are 21P11. So from my understanding, I can only run base images where the last 5 digits start with 21P. So if we look down here, this is an 87 ECU. So we can see down here, 1987 VG30ET, 21P01. And this is for a manual transmission. You can see that the 21P11 was for an automatic transmission. So it might be better to start with the MT base map. But as far as, running a different map or tune, because this is, say this 1988 is a 26P, I do not believe we can just download this bin file or upload it to the ECU and start from there. If you did want to run, say, a tune from a different ECU part number, I believe you would have to upload your bass tune to your ECU and then use the compare and copy the maps over one by one. Alright, so to get started, we will pick the 1987 21P01 MT. This is the VG30ET, and we will open this right here. So now this is a bass tune for a 1987 VG30ET. We will go ahead and burn this to the ECU so that everything has transferred over and we have a clean starting point.
We are satisfied with the current one, it's just the base map. We have a problem. All right, attempt number 3. So we're going to try this again. We will consult to the ECU. We are connected. And we will open up the same file we've been trying to load. What was it? VG30 ET 1987 manual transmission. Select this, open, and so I believe we actually have to upload the maps first. So we'll click the upload button, the little green up arrow. This should load all the maps and tables and everything to the ECU, and then we will burn them to save the changes. And now the base map is on the ECU.
Next thing we need to do is resize the injectors just to see if we can get it started. You can see there's a little initial setup over here about connecting the ECU, map calibration. We're using the same map, so we shouldn't have any issue there. Adjust your injector size, so we'll do that next. This is just an approximation of the K value. That's all the resize injectors does. While you're tuning, you will have to iron out, the exact K value. This is just to get you in a close ballpark. So the K constant is just an overall multiplier for the injectors, and it bases this off of the stock injector size. From my understanding, the injector size is hardwired into the ECU. So I believe if you have a naturally aspirated ECU, you're only adjusting from the naturally aspirated injector size, which is 180, I believe. If you have a Nistune turbo ECU, then you'd be going off of the 260 cc, I believe, injector size. That's just from my understanding. So if we click the factory CC button down here, it shows 260, but I believe this is an NA ECU. So I'm not sure if that has to do with the firmware, but like I said, from my understanding, the injector size is hardwired into the ECU. It's not something you can change with the firmware or software. That's why we're adjusting the K constant. So I think this is actually incorrect. I'm going to change it to 180, which I believe is the naturally aspirated injector size. And then we have the Mercedes injectors. I've seen these injectors called anything from 420, 440, 450, 480, 490, all kinds of things on the old forums and stuff. Bunch of misinformation out there. But the bottom line is, no matter what size the injectors are, it'll be fine-tuned with the K value later on. So from my understanding, all the research I've done, the Mercedes injectors are 495 cc at 3 bar, I believe, or around 40 psi. So I'm going to go ahead and put 495 as my new injector size, and we do want to adjust the load scalers. This should keep all the maps in line, and hopefully we won't have to adjust as many things. So we'll go ahead and see now that our K value has changed to 220. So we'll click OK. Ensure your car is in ignition mode, on, engine off. We are. Click OK. This should be an auto updating feature, but I'm not sure if it saves. So I'm going to go ahead and click the burn button one more time just to ensure that everything is saved into the long-term memory on the ECU. One more thing before our first start, one of the most important gauges is the consult gauges, this radio button up here. So we'll click that, and this has a lot of good information, as well as if we close out of this setup wizard, we also have some good information over here. We have our ignition timing and our injection time. I believe this is the raw value of total injection time, including injection latency and all that. Going over these consult gauges real quick, we have the narrowband O2. I believe this is the injection time. I believe this is the airflow meter, or the mass airflow, or theoretical load or something. We have FTS, which is the short fuel trim, and FTL, which is the long fuel trim. Both of these are based off the narrowband O2. The short fuel trim only adjusts from immediate O2 feedback, and the long fuel trim is adjusted based off stored values after driving. We have our temperature, battery voltage, TP, which is actually the load value or the theoretical load. We have our timing down here, and fuel temp. I don't have that connected. One other important thing right here is the TPS idle. This is our throttle position switch. If I blip the throttle just a little bit, you can see it goes off. So our TPS should be adjusted pretty close. One more important thing, here is the ECU messages. So this will display all your fault codes. You can see fuel pump circuit. I think that's because I have the relay mod. But any other diagnostic trouble codes will show up here instead of having to read the LEDs. So because we have the injectors resized, we should be ready for a first start. So before we attempt a first start, one more thing we should note is that all adjustments and checks should be done at temperature. So you can see we're at 26 degrees Celsius here. We do need to get up to operating temperature before we start checking things like the timing and adjusting fuel map or trying to adjust K value or anything like that. The engine needs to be warm so that we're not in any enrichment tables or cold start or anything else like that. We're just going straight off the injectors in the fuel map. So one more thing I did is I actually connected my wideband through the DLP-AD converter just to get an idea of where we're at with our air-fuel ratio just while we're looking at Nistune. You can see that in a previous video, but go ahead and we can click the wideband button up here and we are connected. So we are ready for the first start. So we will turn the key and we will give it a little bit of throttle just because we don't have any idle air control valves. Everything's deleted and blocked off. So let's see what happens. So you can see I'm just barely giving it a little bit of throttle with the TPS, but it does start. So we do have a solid base to tune from. So if we can let it run enough to get it up to temperature. There's also a engine temp gauge. So I believe 80 degrees Celsius is about where we want to be, somewhere around there, so that we're out of all the cold start and crank enrichment and everything, all the other variable tables that either add or subtract fuel. So we will wait until it gets up to operating temperature and then we'll check the timing. All right, so I have been running it on that just resized injector tune. It did get up to operating temperature. The fan did kick on, so we're just gonna double check timing real quick. We've got an old school timing light connected to the battery, positive and negative. We just disconnected spark plug lead number 1, stuck the little spring in there, and then clipped the the trigger for the light on there. So we'll go ahead and start it back up. And I did make some markings on the crank. 15 degrees is right where that big black mark is. So let's start up and see if we're close. All right, we're idling, timing light, working. Just want to see, don't want this to get caught in the belts. We're just looking for that black mark. It's not going to show up on camera, I think because of the refresh rate of my camera. But if you look, you can just barely see it hitting that black mark right there. Then let's go back to Nistune real quick. Of course, it disconnected when the car was off. See if we can reconsult. And it crashed. So I have noticed an issue when the wideband's connected and you turn off the key and the wideband's still connected and you try and reconnect, reconsult to the ECU, it does crash. I believe you have to disconnect the wideband before you reconsult with the Nistune ECU and then reconnect to the wideband. But let's just consult with the ECU and see what our timing is and see if it matches. Okay, so right here you can see we're at 15 degrees of timing. Also, you can look right here. That's also 15 degrees. And 15 degrees was that big black mark on the crank. can see with my eyes, can't see with the camera, but we are on 15 degrees. So that matches, and that's all we're concerned about.